Good morning, everybody, distinguished panelists, students, everybody in the audience. It's an honor always to come to KCM for this function. I think it's the second or third time that I've been invited, and I'm privileged to be here today to share a few thoughts on something that I think most of us know something about. But before I do that, it was really inspiring to hear your talk today, and I truly believe also we should all be wearing sunglasses when we look at the youth, because if there is any hope for our country, I think it is all of you, the youth. And unfortunately, at times, if ever I feel a bit of fear for this country's future, is when I talk to youth and I see majority of youth don't see your future in Nepal. If the youth of this country don't see a future here, then truly the future of this country would be dark. So I hope that many of you, as was said, will not be job seekers only, but will be job creators, and not job creators in Australia, America, or Europe, but job creators right here in Nepal, where there's an abundance of opportunities. And also, I think I like that little drawing at the end where, this person is juggling things. Right on the offset, if you look at the people who are here on the panel and our diverse backgrounds and what we're going to be talking about, that's what management is all about. Whether you're in a bank, or you're managing a hotel, or you're managing your own business, or your restaurant, or whatever it is, there are a multitude of things that you're going to have to manage as you move forward. And in banking, recently we realized that more than ever, I think in the 25, 26 years that I've been in banking, the sort of stress and pressure that we went through over the last 3 months or so was unprecedented in many ways. And that's what I've been asked to talk to you about today, and that's what we're going to be talking about, which is the liquidity crunch and the reality of what actually happened. I first wanted to give you an overview, so I'm going to move a little bit this side, and I don't know, I think maybe if you sit down it may be easier, I don't know from the organization point of view, otherwise, oh, you got a little screen there, okay. So first of all, the ability to quickly convert an asset to cash with little or no loss, that is what liquidity is about. I will come to what crisis we actually had, but there's a perception that it was a liquidity crisis. In banking, a liquidity crisis, or liquidity as we look at it, is about how much of the deposits that we have can we convert to cash at very little time and very little loss of value. That is what liquidity is about. It is the cash required to meet the immediate short-term obligations, because every day a lot of people come to the banks who have deposited money and take out the money. The proviso under which banks work is that at no point of time will all the people who put in money at the bank come and ask for all the money back. If that happens, no financial institution, not only in Nepal, but in the world, will be able to sustain it. But, however, having said that, we have an estimation as to how much will be required to meet our daily needs, weekly needs, monthly needs, and we do stress tests to ensure that we have the required liquidity. Cash, bank balance, investments from liquidity is what liquidity is for banking sector. For, in our case, treasury bills, savings bonds, cash that we have in our vaults, cash that we have with the Nepal Rashtra Bank is what consists of what we consider to be our liquidity. And to ensure that we actually maintain our liquidity, the central bank has some regulations. Mahendra sir is here, who is a mentor for all of us in banking of my generation at least. He guided us through many, many tough times when he was in the central bank and was the acting governor at the end for a long period of time. And so the central bank guides us and says we have to maintain something called a CCD ratio. What is a CCD ratio? It is a credit to core capital plus deposit ratio. So our core capital of the bank plus deposits, of that, if that is 100, we can lend up to 80 and have to maintain 20 in cash or government securities. So at no point of time, if you have 100 rupees in deposits and core capital, can we lend it all? The maximum we can lend is 80%. Why do we need the 20%? Is to meet our day-to-day requirements. And at any point of time, if large depositors want their money back, we may need to be able to ensure that we are able to give that back. So the assumption here is that no point of time will more than 20% of our depositors come in and ask for their money back. Along with that, we have something called the LD ratio, which is a liquid asset to deposit ratio, and this has to be greater than 20% at any given point of time. So a level of liquidity has to be maintained in the banks to ensure that at no point there is any panic with the depositors. The current situation that we faced recently was not a liquidity ratio crunch or a liquidity crisis, as was said. It was a crunch or a crisis of lendable funds. We had more than enough liquidity. No depositor said, I came to take money and my bank was not able to give money, whether that be commercial bank, development banks, and even finance companies. Everybody was able to meet whatever their requirements was in terms of withdrawing the money from their accounts. The problem was in the 80%. Banks had run out of money to lend. It wasn't that banks had no money to give back to the depositors, it was banks had no money to lend. So whether you wanted to purchase a car and came for a loan, or you wanted to start a business, or you wanted to open an LC or convert it into a TR loan, banks had come to that 80% and said, we cannot lend anymore. As per the guidelines given by the Rashtra Bank, we have reached the limit. And that is where the crunch came in. Therefore, when we hear liquidity crunch, we have a bit of a problem in the banking sector, because it isn't a liquidity crunch. It was actually a crunch of the lendable funds that we were able to give out as loans that we faced. Now, why did we face this? What is the reasons that we came to this? The first one, unlike in most sectors in Nepal, is in the banking sector, in the financial sector, we look inward and say, where is our fault in all this? Rather than blaming, Sitale Sarape ko desh dekhi liya, everything else for our problems in the institutions and the sector, we say, what did we do wrong? And what we did wrong is we lent too much money. The banks in the first 6 months of this fiscal year lent more money than we have in that period of time ever. We lent, the rate of growth of the loans was far, far greater than the rate of growth of the deposits. And therefore, we came to this problem where all the money we had, all the resources we had, all the money we could borrow also to lend, we had already lent out. This, in hindsight, was not a prudent thing to do. This, in hindsight, was something that we should have controlled right from the beginning and not gone into this sort of rapid expansion. The reason we did this, why did we suddenly do this? It isn't that after, I've been in banking for 25, 26 years, some friends have been in for 30 years, 35 years. It isn't that we just woke up this fiscal year and said, let's lend money. No, something critical happened. In the monetary policy, the paid-up capital of the banks was raised by the central bank to 8 billion rupees. Nepal Arab Bank, which is now Nabil Bank, started its work about 35, 36 years back. And until then, till now, our paid-up capital was 2.5 billion, 3 billion, 3.5 billion rupees. Some much less than that. Suddenly, we had to have a capital of 8 billion rupees. This posed two problems for us. First of all, how are we going to get 8 billion rupees from our promoters and shareholders? Some banks chose to merge, some chose to acquire, but most chose to go through right share and bonus shares and ask the existing shareholders and promoters to put in more money to raise the capital to 8 billion. Now, suppose the capital was 2.5, 3 billion or 4 billion rupees even, and we were earning a certain amount of money. And that money converted into, say, 20, 25% dividend for our shareholders. Which shareholders? The people who had invested 4 billion rupees in our institution. Now that 4 billion by the end of this fiscal year was going to become 8 billion rupees. As we know with promoters and shareholders, they want returns to consistently increase, not decrease. And therefore, all the banks looked around and said, how are we going to give the same sort of return that we've been giving on 4 billion rupees capital on an 8 billion rupees capital, which is, 100% increase, or even more than that in many cases. The main source of income for banks is what? Interest on loans. So what did we do? We said, let's lend money. And we started to lend money without keeping a medium-term or long-term vision, keeping a what I call quarter tak attitude, which is my results must go from one quarter to the other, it must increase, my bottom line must be enhanced, and for that we must lend money. And we lent so much money that we ran out of money to lend, creating the crunch in liquidity. And for that, I think all of us in the banking sector have recognized that this was an error in judgment, an error in management, and something not to be repeated going forward. But along with this, which was our fault, what else happened? We had sluggish deposit collection. The main reason for this was the slow capital expenditure of the government of Nepal, which even in 8 months has only managed to spend 35% of the budgeted amount on capital expenditure. We must all realize, as most of us are Nepalese in this hall, that we have a new constitution. Under this new constitution, we had the first new budget. It was a mega budget. The budget, if you look at it, had two halves. One was on the reconstruction after the massive earthquake that we underwent, and the other was the normal budget, which itself was also very large. When this budget was announced, we could have done two things. The first is we can say, कागजमा लेखे यो कार्यान्वयन कहाँ हुन्छ र? यस्ता बजेट त कति आए कति गए. As responsible business leaders in Nepal, It is not our duty to have such sort of attitude. It is our duty to believe the government of Nepal, the Ministry of Finance, the Parliament, and say when they say it, they will do it, especially under a new constitution with 7 provinces and a federal structure. So we believed. We believed that the budget would be implemented in totality. And not only the financial sector, the private sector also believed. And the private sector saw this huge reconstruction, huge infrastructure building, and said we must enhance our capacity to build, to produce cement, to produce steel, to produce bricks, to produce whatever it is that is required. Because if we don't produce, the government will spend and they will import. So they, to enhance their capacity, what did they do? They came to us for loans. And we said, how come? They said, all this budget is here. They're going to build all these roads and these transmission lines and all this reconstruction. We need to enhance capacity, build new cement factories, build new steel factories, and so on and so forth. And they will put in 25, 30%. And who puts in the 70%? But the financial sector. And so, because there was a huge budget that we thought would be implemented, we lent. The other reason why there was excessive lending. The other one was the increment in remittance inflows slowed down. I want to make it clear, it's not that remittance has decreased. It's not that remittance is not growing. The rate of growth of remittance is coming down. Multiple reasons for this. It's not that less Nepalese are going abroad also, they are also going abroad. But there is a crisis, oil sort of price crisis in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia, which is one of the major importers of Nepali people, is facing an economic crisis. They're saying things like only Saudis can drive taxis, only Saudis can work in shopping malls. I don't know what else they will come up with next. This is creating a problem for Nepalese going abroad, and therefore the rate of growth of the remittance slowed down, and therefore the money in the market, which is mainly coming from remittance, also slowed down. Also, FDI, which was, as the minister rightfully said, we held investment summits and so on and so forth, and road shows all over the place. And everyone very excited, but not much money coming yet because of the still lack of stability in the political arena in the country. And with no injection of foreign capital, even that sort of source didn't go as per the expectations, as per the budget or the private sector and the finance sector. And that also didn't give us the sort of returns that we wanted. On the other hand, what happened? The budget has 2 sides, any budget. One is the expenditure, one is the revenue. On the expenditure side, the government was not able to spend, so only 35% has been spent over 8 months. While on the revenue side, because the private sector was energized, and with that energy went the financial sector as well, all revenue budgets were overshot. The government actually made more money than it had even budgeted for. Tax, income tax, VAT, excise, customs, everything was going through the roof for the first 6 months. World Bank came, IMF came, 6.9% economic growth. We're going to even see even further economic growth. If you have a great monsoon, that is even going to be even better for us, so on and so forth. So what happened? The amount of funds going from the market into the government exchequer increased more than budget. Currently, just yesterday, the governor was saying there is 255 billion rupees in the government coffers. 255 billion rupees, which is not in the market. This also led to the economic crisis. Post-earthquake reconstruction, as we all know, also didn't happen. A lot of our brothers and sisters are still living in tents, and the money that was supposed to be spent there also was not spent, unfortunately. The credit expansion in the banks was also due to, it's like a flood after a dam opens. The earthquake, the Tarai Andolan, not much economic activity was happening. When everything lifted, the Tarai Andolan lifted, earthquake stabilized, the ground was not shaking, everybody wanted to do more business, wanted more loans, creating more tension for all of us. We must also realize that we are a cash-based economy, and so is India, till recently. When Mr. Modi demonetized India, an interesting thing happened. Until that moment, about 5-10 miles into Nepal, most of the trade used to happen in Indian rupees. Nepalese rupees were never accepted across the border in India, but Indian rupees were accepted. For instance, a truck comes bringing goods from anywhere in India to Nepal. The driver has to be paid in Indian rupees. He's not going to accept Nepalese rupees in cash. After demonetization, 5 to 10 miles into India, Nepalese rupees was freely accepted. Because there was no Indian rupees, people still had to do business. So they said, okay, we'll take in Nepalese rupees for now. So a lot of our cash went into India, where first they were just trading with us, then we found they were trading with each other with Nepalese rupees also, because actually there was no cash. So this also led to a bit of a crisis for all of us. And also in the past, when we had FPOs or IPOs, money used to have to go to Rashtra Bank, and at this critical time, NLIC had an FPO and about 52 billion rupees went to Rashtra Bank for a week, creating a bit of tension. I shall go a bit faster now. Money is still not channelized through the banking sector. We all know that. There's an informal economy that goes through. Rashtra Bank is working, the Ministry of Finance is working to slowly bring more and more money into the financial sector. Massively growing imports and declining exports has led to a trade deficit, although our balance of payment is very rosy still, because a lot of money still comes in from the remittance business. So the reality, we're forced to raise rates for deposits. I remember rates at 1.5%, 2% savings rates. Now the current savings rate is 6 to 8%. The loan rates at the end of the last fiscal year was 5.5 to 6%. The lending rates. Now our savings bank rate is 6 to 8%. So we can see how the rates have moved. So we have some unhealthy competition. Along with that, operating costs of banks have also going up with the costs of everything and the inflation. Lending rates are becoming costlier, and we don't know how much our economy can actually bear, up to what cost, what is the normal rate for lending and what is the normal rate for deposits. We're trying to find that out. Is it 6%? Is it 13%? Is it 15%? If the situation prolongs for much further, we believe that there will be an economic impact, not only in the banking sector, but for the whole economy, because everybody works on loans, as we all know. And if the loans are very expensive, it sort of shrinks the capacity of production, it shrinks business positivity, and it will shrink our growth rate as well, which none of us want to do. But on the other hand, the Nepalese general public, who are only getting 1.5%, 2%, 3%, and we're talking crores of Nepalese who have bank accounts, now with our new constitution, which in the preamble itself states that we are a socialist-leaning nation, Samajwadi Mukhi Desh, we must remember that the masses must also now benefit from any sector, including the financial sector. So maybe 6 to 8% is not bad for them to get as deposits. The ever-increasing cost of production, of course, means the cost comes down to you, me, and to everybody, and that is it. That is what is going to happen. From the price of potatoes to the price of everything else is going to go up, which none of us likes. With the rise of production costs, fledgling exports industries that we have, which is very small, will also not benefit. Business houses are not thinking about future expansions right now because of interest costs. Even hydros are having problems because of the high interest rate costs, so it is going to have a medium to long-term impact. The crisis has produced adverse repercussions in industries and businesses, which were just recovering from the earthquake and the Madhes Andolan, but now are going back into another sort of a shrinkage. FDI was required, but FDI is still not coming in as we think. Minister and the government is much more keen on FDI right now, but still we have a lot yet to come. And finally, looking forward, what will we do now? I want to clearly state, as the president of the Nepal Bankers Association, the banks will restrain themselves in lending. We will lend only as much as the deposit grows. This does not in any way mean the banks will stop lending. We will continue to lend, but only as much as the deposit grows, not more. And we will lend to what the government of Nepal considers the productive sector, not auto loan or real estate or margin lending or all these sort of things, but into the productive sector will be the focus of the lending. And the lending in that sector will also be restrained. We'll have a longer-term vision. As I said, no more one quarter to another. I think the boards have also learned, shareholders and promoters have also learned that they must gauge their expectations. They cannot have the same sort of expectations they had in the past. Those days will return, maybe after 5 years, maybe after 6 years, but not right now. We'll stabilize interest rates. Right now, wherever the rates are, we're trying to stabilize it at that point, maybe decrease it a little in the going few ahead at the end of the fiscal year, but try to make sure that the rates don't get raised in the deposits or lending more than it is right now. And going forward, we will wait for the government to act. We will not preempt in the hope that the government will do what it says. We will wait until it actually acts, and once the action is done, then we will sort of match up. I think the private sector believes with that. And we will also start preparing to work with the federal, as per the federal structure. As we know, elections, local elections after 20 years are happening from Sunday onwards. And with that, we will get local government, we will get provincial government, and once we have 7 provincial governments, along with the national government of Nepal, I think associations like Nepal Bankers Association, FNCCI, CNI, Chamber, all of us also want to engage with the Chief Minister, with the Finance Minister and the ministers and the ministries of these 7 provinces to make sure that we make the right economic decisions going forward. And finally, I think working together is critical. I don't think the government can work on its own, the private sector on its own, the development partners on its own. We must learn to work together. And now there used to be just one government, which used to sit in Singhdarbar. Now we'll have 7 governments sitting in whichever capitals that they choose for the 7 provinces. And going forward, we have to learn to work together. This is a critical factor. Sometimes the most simple things are the ones that ensure success or failure. And this is the factor we feel in the finance sector for Nepal. We must learn to work together. If the provincial governments can't work with their local governments and the national government and the development partners and the private sector, then I don't think we have even seen the tip of the iceberg in terms of the problems that await us. However, if we find out a way to all work together, I think the days ahead will be better. We did have a crunch in lending. Crunch is now coming to an end. Going forward, the banks will lend, but not in the way that we lend in the first 6 months of this year. We have all learned, and that is what I think is critical for all of you to take away from this as well, that we will make mistakes. When we make mistakes, we must stand up and say we made a mistake. And when someone says that, that person or those institutions or whatever should be given time to set those mistakes correct. And if they move in the right path, we will come back on track, as we have, as the financial sector. We didn't see any Gog bank go into any sort of dharap and become, illiquid or anything of the sort. We managed the situation. We are where we are. Now we have all had learnings. The regulator has had learnings. We have had learnings. The private sector, our customers has had learnings. And I think from this learnings, we'll all move forward stronger, move forward more poised for greater things in the days ahead. Thank you very much. And to end, I'm sorry I won't be able to take part in the discussions later on because it is somebody's birthday and I'm going to his birthplace to celebrate the birthday. Whose birthday is it? The most famous Nepali. Come on, the most famous Nepali, worldwide, known by Bill Gates, Warren Buffett. Lord Buddha, yes, it's his birthday, so I'm going to Lumbini. I will most probably miss my flight already due to the minister. I shall thank him for that. But I'll be here for a brief time and then I will move on. Thank you very much for the opportunity.